Most Americans never learned his name, but they lived inside his music. It played softly in the background of everyday life. From kitchen radios early in the morning, from living room speakers after a long day, from car dashboards during slow night drives home. You did not have to search for it. It found you. The calm, the warmth, the feeling that someone, somewhere, still believed in love, dignity, and restraint. That sound did not come from chance. It came from Chris Jasper. While voices took center stage, he shaped what surrounded them. The chords that lingered, the harmonies that felt almost spiritual, the space between notes that made a song breathe. In an industry that celebrates the face at the microphone, Chris Jasper chose a different role. He built worlds behind the curtain, worlds that became part of American memory. Songs like Caravan of Love did not ask for attention. They offered comfort. And in times when the country felt divided, that mattered more than noise. This is not a story about fame. It is a story about influence, about how one man quietly defined the sound of a generation and why it took so long for America to truly see him. Before the world ever argued about credit, contracts, or charts, Chris Jasper was shaped by something far quieter: discipline, structure, and a deep respect for music as a language. He was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, into a household where music was not entertainment. It was tradition. His mother played piano. An uncle performed as a first violinist with the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra. Sound was part of the air he breathed. By the age of 7, Chris could hear a melody on the radio and play it back on the piano without instruction. No sheet music, no rehearsal, just instinct. It was the kind of gift that makes adults stop talking and listen. But natural ability was never allowed to stand alone. His mother insisted he learn how music worked. She sent him for formal piano instruction through a professor connected to the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music. Chris learned to read, analyze, and respect every note. This was not about fame. It was about mastery. At the same time, America was shaping his emotional ear. He listened to Ray Charles, Sam Cooke, Jackie Wilson, James Brown, and Marvin Gaye. He absorbed gospel from the church and soul from the radio. What made Chris different was that he never separated these worlds. Classical structure lived comfortably beside R&B feeling. Just down the street lived another family immersed in music, the Isley Brothers. Chris met them when he was still a toddler. The older brothers felt distant, already grown. But with Ernie and Marvin, something clicked. They were close in age. They spoke the same musical language before they ever named it. When Chris's sister married Rudolph Isley, family and future merged. Summers were spent in New Jersey, watching the Isley Brothers build something bigger than records. They were creating independence, their own label, their own rules. As a teenager, Chris formed a small group with Ernie and Marvin. They played wherever people would listen. Churches, school events, community halls. There was no spotlight yet, only preparation. Unlike many young musicians, Chris did not rush toward the industry. He chose education again. New York City became his classroom. He studied music composition, learning how harmony, tension, and release truly function. Jazz expanded his vocabulary. Classical training sharpened his discipline. By the time he stepped fully into the Isley Brothers world, Chris Jasper was not just a musician. He was a thinker, a builder, someone who understood that sound could be designed, not just performed. And that difference would soon change everything. When Chris Jasper fully stepped into the world of the Isley Brothers, it was not a takeover. It was a transformation. The group was already famous. They had hits. They had history. But what they did not yet have was a modern musical identity that could survive a changing America. Chris helped build that identity quietly. He did not announce himself. He listened. Then he reimagined. What emerged was a sound rooted in discipline, but driven by feeling. Classical harmony met funk rhythm. Jazz chords softened hard grooves. Silence became just as important as sound. The album 3+3 marked the turning point. This was not simply another release. It was a declaration that the Isley Brothers were no longer just vocalists. They were architects of their own music. That lady introduced a new intensity. Ernie's guitar cut through the track with rock influence, while Chris layered harmony beneath it, creating depth that felt almost cinematic. The song crossed genres and generations, signaling that something new had arrived. From there, the catalog deepened rather than chased trends. Fight the Power spoke with urgency, but never chaos. It carried resistance without rage. Its influence would later ripple into hip-hop and film, proving that social commentary did not need volume to be effective. For the Love of You slowed everything down. It trusted restraint. The song did not reach for drama. It allowed intimacy to do the work. That choice made it timeless. Then came the songs that felt like atmosphere rather than statements. Footsteps in the Dark moved gently, almost cautiously, leaving room for reflection. Decades later, its quiet groove would anchor one of hip-hop's most recognizable moments, reminding listeners that the past never really leaves. And then there was Between the Sheets. Nothing about it was rushed. The chord progression breathed. The rhythm settled into a confident calm. Chris shaped the structure, the mood, and the space between notes, trusting the listener to lean in. These were not accidental successes. They were built. Album after album, the Isley Brothers reached new heights. Platinum records, #1 charts, cross-genre influence that few black bands of the era achieved. Yet within the success, a quiet imbalance existed. The sound belonged to everyone. The work did not always feel equally acknowledged. Chris Jasper had helped define the emotional vocabulary of American soul music. But the system was not designed to spotlight those who stayed behind the curtain. At the peak of creation, questions began to surface. Not about music, about value. And those questions would soon reshape everything he had built. At the height of their creative power, the music sounded calm. But behind it, nothing was. For Chris Jasper, the late years with the Isley Brothers marked the moment when brilliance collided with reality. Not artistic reality, business reality. The albums were selling. The tours were full. The songs were becoming permanent fixtures in American culture. Yet questions that had been ignored for years were now impossible to silence. Who was actually building the music? Who was carrying the creative weight? And why the compensation no longer reflected that truth? Chris, along with Ernie and Marvin, was deeply involved in every layer of production. Writing, arranging, directing sessions, shaping the emotional tone of the songs before a single vocal was finalized. The credits listed 6 names, but the process was not evenly shared. At the same time, serious financial problems began to surface among the older members. Tax issues, industry pressure, decisions made years earlier were now demanding repayment. One proposed solution was drastic: bankruptcy, a reset that would dissolve contracts and move the group forward under new terms. For Chris, this was not just a financial decision. It was a moral one. He did not want to erase years of work. He did not want to surrender control of music he had helped build from the ground up. And unlike others in the group, he was not facing the same financial liabilities. The disagreement was not loud. It was heavy. Even as the group released Between the Sheets, one of the most influential soul albums ever recorded, trust was quietly unraveling. The irony was painful. Their most refined work arrived at the exact moment unity disappeared. The break was inevitable. Chris, Ernie, and Marvin moved forward under a new name, Isley Jasper Isley, remaining with CBS Records. The separation was not clean. Legal action followed. Attempts were made to block releases and restrict identities, turning family disagreements into corporate conflict. Still, the music refused to disappear. Isley Jasper Isley released their debut album, proving they were not simply an extension of the past. They were creators in their own right. And then came Caravan of Love, a song about peace, unity, and shared humanity, written during a time when none of those things felt guaranteed. It was not defiant. It was deliberate. But stability did not last. Without warning, Ernie Isley chose to leave the group. No long discussion. No gradual transition. Just absence. Once again, Chris Jasper was left standing alone, carrying music that had already proven its worth, but without the structure that once supported it. For many artists, this would have been the end. A quiet fade into history. For Chris, it became the moment he chose a different kind of survival. When Caravan of Love reached the airwaves, it did not arrive as a protest. It arrived as a reminder. In the United States, the early 1980s were loud. Politics were sharp. Music was increasingly driven by image, speed, and confrontation. Against that backdrop, Caravan of Love felt almost out of time. And that was exactly why it mattered. Older American listeners heard something familiar in it. Not nostalgia, but values. Harmony that felt communal. Lyrics that spoke of unity without accusation. It sounded like a song meant to bring people into the same room, not push them into opposite corners. For many, it felt spiritual even if they never stepped inside a church. The message was clear without being forceful. Love was not weakness. It was responsibility. Radio programmers embraced it quietly. The song did not dominate through hype. It endured through repetition. Late-night rotations. Sunday mornings. Long drives where silence felt too heavy. Then the song crossed the ocean. In the United Kingdom, the Housemartins released an a cappella cover of Caravan of Love. The arrangement was stripped down, but the message remained intact. It went to #1 on the UK singles chart and spread across Europe. Different accents, different context, same meaning. That moment confirmed something essential about Chris Jasper's writing. It did not belong to one genre, one country, or one generation. It belonged to people. Back in America, his influence continued in another way. Hip-hop producers and R&B artists sampled the Isley catalog relentlessly. They borrowed the warmth, the structure, the emotional honesty, sometimes without knowing who built it. And that is where Chris Jasper's story reflects a larger American truth. The culture often celebrates the voice we hear first, not the mind that shaped the sound, not the hands that built the foundation. Yet for listeners who eventually learn his name, the realization is powerful. They recognize that the music they trusted for decades was never accidental. It was intentional, thoughtful, rooted in belief. Chris Jasper did not chase relevance. He created something lasting. And across America, and far beyond it, people are still listening. In the end, Chris Jasper did not disappear. He narrowed his focus. After years of giving his creativity to systems that did not always protect him, he chose understanding over resentment. He studied the business that had confused so many artists before him. Contracts, copyright, ownership. He earned a law degree not to argue, but to shield what mattered. Through his own label, Gold City Records, Chris continued making music on his own terms. Soul, funk, gospel, social reflection. The sound was familiar, but the intention felt deeper. This was music made without pressure, without compromise. He recorded albums that spoke about faith, responsibility, and education. Songs that did not chase radio, but spoke to people willing to listen. He visited schools. He talked to young people about discipline, knowledge, and self-respect. Not as a celebrity, as someone who had seen both success and cost. While the industry moved on, his earlier work never did. The songs he helped create continued to live new lives. Sampled by hip-hop artists, reimagined by R&B singers, discovered by listeners too young to remember where they came from. Recognition arrived slowly, but it arrived honestly. Lifetime Achievement Awards, industry acknowledgments, and finally, induction into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. A moment that confirmed what the music had always known. In early 2025, Chris Jasper passed away after a brief battle with cancer. He was 73. Tributes came quietly, but sincerely. Fellow musicians spoke of his discipline, his musical mind, and his generosity. The institutions that once overlooked him now acknowledged his role in shaping soul and funk music across decades. But his true legacy does not live in plaques or ceremonies. It lives in the calm of Caravan of Love, in the intimacy of For the Love of You, in the space between notes that still feels human. Chris Jasper believed music should leave people better than it found them. He proved that you do not need to be loud to be lasting. If this story reminded you of a song, a memory, or a moment in your life, share it below. And if you believe the people behind the music deserve to be remembered, stay with us. Some artists sing the soundtrack. Others write the soul of it.